again, this reverse problem, we want to go back to 100%. So what is 100%? Now again, how do you get from 105 to 100? Well, I can divide the 105 by 105 to get 1%, and times by 100. So if I do that on the left-hand side, I've got to do that on the right-hand side. So I would do 126 divided by 105 times 100. And that will give me an answer of £120. Now again, I can check this, right? Because if I take the 5% of £120 and I add it to the £120, which was the original wage, I should get a new wage of £126. So what is 5% of £120? Well, we know how to do this from earlier in the lesson. So 5 divided by 100 times 120, which equals to £6. So if I increase my old wage by £6, so 120 plus 6 equals to 126. If we go back, we can see that we were told the new wage is £126. So we know we have done this correctly. Right, so hopefully that should clear up the reverse percentage problems. Again, it doesn't really get any more difficult than that. If you understand the theory here that I've explained, then just with a bit of practice on other questions, you should be totally fine. Okay? So let's move on then. The last bit in this lesson we're going to look at is simple interest and compound interest. So simple and compound. We'll start with simple interest. Again, we'll do this by a question. So the formula for simple interest, I'll write out here and I'll explain it. You don't need to remember this formula, you just need to know how to apply it. It's quite straightforward. So, simple interest equals to the amount invested, times by the time in years, times by the rate of interest per year. So this is like putting your money in the bank, and the question being, after 1 year, what's the amount of money in your bank account? Now this assumes that after 1 year you're taking that money out. So you're not going to leave that money in the bank account and accumulate interest for year 2 and year 3 and so on. You're taking this money out. So this is looking at simple interest. We'll look at compound interest in a few minutes. Now let's do this by example. So question 1 says, find the simple interest paid on £600 invested for 6 months at 8% per year. So 8% per year. So if we go back to our formula, the simple interest equals the amount invested. So our amount invested is 600 times by the time in years. So how many years are we looking at? Well, this is 6 months, so this is half a year. So I can write this as 6 over 12, so 6 months out of the full year, which is 12 months, multiplied by the interest per year. So that is times 8%. So if I write that out as a decimal, it's 0.08, that's 8%. Now I just plug that into a calculator, and that will give me £24. So that means in 6 months, if I put £600 in an account or in an investment, and I earn 8% per annum, after 6 months I'm going to have £24 in interest. Right, so let's look at the final bit of this, which is compound interest. And I would say an area which I particularly like because of its practical concepts. And if you ever listen to one of my personal finance talks, or if you ever meet me in person, I could go on and on about compound interest and the power of compound interest in its ability to grow your investments year after year. But for the practice of maths and your exam, let's look at how compound interest works. So compound interest. As we said before then, compound interest is all about earning interest on interest. So let's do this by an example. So e.g., find the compound interest paid on, so the question is find the compound interest paid on, again, £600, invested for 3 years at 6% per year. So this is now you're going to earn. This is where you're going to earn interest, and after a year, you're going to whatever money is accumulated on your balance, you'll leave that in your account, and the following year you'll earn 6% on the new balance, and then the third year, you're going to earn 6% on that new balance. So how does that work? Well, in our first year, so year 1, will be just like the previous example, right? So here we would have put our £600 in for the year, and we're going to multiply that by the rate of interest, and so that's going to be 600 times 6%, which is 0.06, and it's 1 year, so you're timing that by 1. So that's the value after 1 year, and that equals to £636. So year 2. Now, how much have you got at the end of year 1? You've got £636. So now you want to work out the 6% on that 636, not on the original 600. That's the difference between compound interest and simple interest. So year 2, you've got £636 now, and you're going to times that by a return of 6%, or the interest rate 6%. And again, we're looking at 1 year period, because we're only looking at year 2. So times that again by 1, and that will give you, so that equals to £674 and 16 pence. Year 3 then, our balance now at the end of year 2 is £674 and 16 pence. So now we would take the £674 and 16 pence, and we want to work out the value at the end of year 3. So we're going to times that again by 6%, because you're earning 6% per annum. So times 0.06, and the time period is just 1 year, so times 1. So that will give you a value of £714 and 61 pence. So at the end of year 3, you're going to have £714 61 pence. So if the question was how much compound interest was earned or paid on that in the original balance, you're going to take the final value, which is £714 61, take away the original, which was 600, and that gives you £114 and 61. So that is the compound interest that you earned at the end of those 3 years. Now, there's a quick way of calculating this, and I encourage you all to learn this. And the way you can do this is you take the original balance, 600, you multiply by, so the interest rate was 6%. So if I multiply this by 1.06, so this means you're increasing your 600 balance by 6%. So 600 times 1.06, and then you raise that 1.06 to the number of years that you're leaving your money in that, the number of years you're leaving the money in the account, or the number of years you're accumulating interest for. So in this case, we're doing it for 3 years. So you would do 600 times 1.06 to the power of 3, which basically means you're increasing the 600 by a rate of 6% for 3 years, and that'll give you the same answer of £114 61. So if the exam question was, all right, work out the balance at the end of 10 years, then you would do 600 times 1.06 to the power of 10. And that, whatever the answer to that is, so if I just type that into my calculator quickly, that's 600 times 1.06 to the power of 10, which gives you £1,074 and 51 pence. Now notice that you haven't added any more money in. You put £600 in 10 years ago. In 10 years, your investment has grown to £1,074. It's almost approaching doubling the value without you contributing any more money. It's the power of compounding and the power of the 10 years, the time that you're allowing your money to grow by this compounding effect, which has sufficient ability to grow your investments and wealth. But looking at the case for your math exam, this is how you would calculate it. So it's very straightforward to do this calculation, and I hope this has answered your questions and helped you in understanding percentages, simple interest, compound interest. Thank you for listening.